The porch still creaked like it remembered her, his wife, gone 2 winters now, but it was another set of small hands that tugged at his coat buttons this morning. The little one. Always the early riser. Her braid was crooked again. He sat her between his knees and redid it by the glow of the hearth, fingers rough but gentle. The twins slept still, arms tangled in blankets like vines, cheeks pink with leftover fever. He glanced toward the ladder that led up to the loft. Empty. Quiet. As it had been for months. The wind outside hummed low, as if holding something back. The fire popped once, then settled. He'd stopped marking days. There was no rhythm anymore, only the pull of chores, water to haul, animals to tend, bread to knead whether his hands shook or not. And in that endless turning, something inside him had gone quiet too. Not dead, but distant. Like a bird that had flown into a canyon and never returned its echo. That morning, he was fixing the gate hinge when old Silas rode up, his mule grunting like it hated the message it carried. "Trouble in town," Silas said after a long silence. He didn't ask for coffee, didn't dismount, just stared hard. He stood, brushing rust from his hands. "Speak plain." Silas looked at the girls playing in the mud, then back at the widower. "It's her." That one word cracked something between his ribs. He hadn't heard her name in a year. "She's still at her husband's family's ranch," Silas continued. "His brothers ain't good men. Gambling debts swallowed half their land. And yesterday, one of 'em said something that turned my stomach." The widower waited. His jaw tightened. "They said they'd auction her off." Silas looked away when he said it. "She's your kin by marriage," he added softer. "Your girl's aunt." No more was said. Silas turned his mule and left behind the weight. That night, the widower sat outside with the shotgun across his knees, the firelight flickering across the dirt yard. He stared into the dark for a long time. He didn't pray, but he remembered. Her voice, her laugh, the way she used to bring flowers for the girls, even after she wasn't chosen, especially then. In another life, he might have said yes to her first. He rose before dawn and saddled his horse. The girls stirred but didn't ask. They knew that look on their father's face. They'd seen it when the fever nearly took their sister, when the drought cracked their well. He rode into town beneath a sky the color of spilled ink. By the time he arrived, the square was already half full. Folks drawn to the stench of something shameful. Laughter echoed off the church walls. One man shouted something vulgar. Another raised a hand of cards, grinning. And in the center, beneath a crude wooden sign that read estate sale, she stood. Phil. Chin lowered. Hair tucked under a shawl that couldn't hide the bruise on her jaw. A man read off debts like prices of cattle. The widower didn't speak. Just dismounted. Moved through the crowd like fog. People parted without knowing why. He reached the edge of the platform. The man holding the ledger laughed nervously. "Didn't know you were in the market." The widower looked up, straight into her eyes. She flinched, but only slightly. He didn't blink. "How much?" That quiet, steady voice cut through the morning like a knife through frost. The man fumbled with his notes. "Well, she ain't exactly for sale. This is about clearing." "How much?" he said again, and this time no one moved. The ledger man shrugged, called out a number. Too high. The widower paid it. Coins clinked like thunder. He held out a hand. She looked at it, not sure if it was pity or prison. Then she stepped down, took it. Not a word passed between them, only the heat of her palm against his, dry and trembling. They rode in silence. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't offer. The wind bit through their coats as the landscape blurred into gray hills and naked trees. He drove the wagon, eyes forward. She sat beside him, arms wrapped tight, staring at the road like it could unravel everything that had just happened. When they reached the homestead, the girls came running. They stopped short when they saw her. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just stood still, waiting to be judged. But one of the girls, the one with the crooked braid, stepped forward, took her hand, and whispered something. She blinked hard. The widower led her to the barn. "You'll have your own space." He pointed to the loft. "Clean hay, folded blanket, small lantern. No one will touch you here." She didn't nod, just climbed the ladder and lay down with her back to the world. That night, he sat by the fire. The girls asleep around him, limbs draped over quilts. The air smelled of ash and old apples. He poured himself a cup of coffee and stared at the ladder. Up there, a woman who once braided his daughter's hair, who had once brought him pears wrapped in handkerchiefs, who had once waited on a choice that never came. And now she was here, because no one else wanted her. The coffee went cold in his hand. In the dark above, she lay with open eyes, listening to the house breathe. She was free, and yet not. He had saved her, but not said why. She didn't know if she was a burden, a ghost, or something else entirely. But for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid to sleep. Because the last voice she heard that day wasn't the man with the ledger. It was a little girl, pulling her close, saying softly, "You smell like someone I remember." And somehow, that felt like a door not quite locked. Something had begun, not with fire, but with warmth that might still grow. It was always colder in the loft. The boards whispered at night like they were remembering too much. She slept with her shawl wrapped tight, not for warmth, but for memory. The lantern burned low beside her, the same wick she'd lit every night since arriving. Some nights, she forgot she was safe now. Other nights, she forgot she wasn't a wife anymore. Most nights, she remembered everything and slept anyway. Downstairs, she heard their rhythms, bare feet padding across wood, spoons tapping bowls, laughter too soft to sting. The children were kind. That made it worse. Kindness could unravel a person faster than cruelty. At least with cruelty, a body knew how to brace. She stayed quiet in the mornings, helped with the wash, churned the butter, hung clothes until her fingers stung. The girls watched her, curious but never too close. Except the youngest, she followed her like a shadow, silent, attached. The others called her Birdie. She never corrected them. One afternoon, while boiling water, she heard him enter the kitchen. He moved like someone used to being unnoticed. Didn't stomp. Didn't announce. Just appeared, like weather. "I fixed the latch on your window." His voice had that same low gravity, like it wasn't asking for response. She nodded, didn't meet his eyes, dried her hands slowly. "You don't need to do all this," he added. "The chores." She finally looked at him. Not hard. Not soft either. "I need to do something." He didn't argue. Just left the room with the same quiet he came in with. She watched the door long after it closed. Later that week, while pulling weeds from the edge of the garden, the youngest came to her with a bundle of string. "Will you show me how to make the corn husk dolls again?" she whispered. It was the first thing she'd asked of her. She blinked once, nodded, and sat with the girl on the step, weaving silence into something that almost felt like belonging. She had made dolls like this with her sister once. They'd sit in the same patch of sun, arguing over whose was prettier, laughing like they'd never run out of years. The girl's fingers were clumsy, eager. "What was my ma like?" she asked without looking up. Her chest stilled. "She was bright," she whispered. "Like buttercups. She used to hum when she sewed." The girl smiled at that. "I do too." The doll in her lap tumbled sideways, unfinished. But the moment was whole. That evening, when the widower returned from town, he paused at the porch. She was inside, mending socks, her needle working with steady rhythm. He watched her through the open door, unnoticed. The fire lit her face gently. Her mouth didn't smile, but it had softened. Her shoulders were no longer tight as rope. He said nothing, just left the sack of salt and beans on the table and retreated. That night, she opened the small box she kept under her cot. Inside were things no one asked about: a folded photograph, a button from a coat long lost, a letter that had never been sent. At the bottom, tied in ribbon, was a pressed yellow flower. She stared at it like a secret dared to bloom. They'd been young. She was 16. He was already spoken for. Or at least, her father had spoken for him. Still, one afternoon by the river, he had carved her initials in the bark of a willow tree. She'd watched him do it. Said nothing. Only touched the letters after he left. Weeks later, his engagement was announced. Not to her. She had wept in silence and accepted the role given to her, the extra sister. The one not chosen. Now she lived in the house where that other life had unfolded. She stirred the same soups, touched the same banister, folded the same shirts, and she could not tell where the past ended or the present began. One morning, while gathering eggs, she caught her reflection in the windowpane. She didn't look like a woman who'd been rescued. She looked like a woman still standing in the shadow of someone else's choices. In town, the whispers began again. She's living there now. Bold. Replaced the dead with the next of kin. They say he paid for her. She heard them. Felt them like dust settling in her lungs. At the dry goods store, the woman behind the counter raised a brow. You need anything else, missus? That word clanged like iron. She shook her head. Turned fast. The loaf of bread under her arm felt suddenly too heavy. Back at the homestead, she didn't speak as she unpacked the supplies. The girls noticed but didn't ask. He came in after a long ride. Dust streaked across his shoulders. Something wrong. She set the flour down harder than she meant to. I'm not your wife. He blinked. I know that. Do you? She asked, voice quiet but edged. Because it feels like I've stepped into a dead woman's dress. One that never fit me to begin with. He looked at her a long time. Then said, You're not her. She crossed her arms. Then why bring me here? Why pay them? Because they would have broken you. And I couldn't bear that. She stared at him. But you didn't choose me then. Not when it might have mattered. His eyes dropped. I wasn't brave enough to want what I wanted. I was told who to love, and I obeyed. The silence between them felt ancient. He looked up again, voice rough. I'm sorry. She turned away. Her hands trembled, though she clenched them tight. That night, she found a folded note beside her lantern. 4 words in his plain, strong script. You are not forgotten. She didn't cry. Not yet. But she lay back on the cot and whispered into the dark. I don't want to be remembered. I want to be seen. The next morning, the youngest brought her a flower. Small, crushed, but bright. She tucked it behind her ear without a word. And when he passed by the porch, he paused. She didn't smile. But she met his eyes. Held them. He nodded once. Not like a man asking forgiveness. But like someone offering time. She returned the gesture. Something had cracked. Not broken. Just loosened. And that was enough. The first sign of spring came not in the thaw, but in the way the wind stopped biting. One morning, the frost on the porch rail didn't crunch beneath her fingers. The air still held its chill, but the cruelty had faded from it, as if the land itself had exhaled after a long-held breath. She hung linens on the line, fingers red with cold, and noticed the way the sunlight caught the cotton like a whisper. The youngest girl was gathering sticks behind her, humming a tune with no melody, skipping between shadows. The sound made her heart ache without warning. He was in the field, sleeves rolled, tending to the new fence. Every few moments, he glanced up, not to stare, just to note her presence. She didn't know what to do with that quiet awareness. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't pity. It felt like respect, and that was far more dangerous. Later that day, a storm threatened on the horizon, low clouds that moved like slow horses, grumbling their warnings. She rushed to pull the laundry down, the girl helping, little arms full of still damp cloth. Inside, she moved quickly, lighting lamps, placing buckets under leaks. He entered with his boots muddy, face streaked with sweat and dust. The wind slammed the shutters. The youngest girl cried out. Without thinking, she gathered the child into her arms, whispering old lullabies into hair that smelled of wheat and smoke. He watched her from the threshold. She didn't see the look on his face. Like a man recognizing something he'd never dared ask for. The storm passed quickly, all fury and flash. When silence returned, the girls were asleep in a pile of quilts. She rose from the floor and found him on the porch, smoking slow, hat tipped back. She stepped beside him. Didn't sit. Just stood in the hush. "Thank you," he said, voice low. "For what?" "For staying." The wind toyed with her skirt. "I'm still not sure I was ever meant to leave." He turned to her. "You did once." "I didn't want to." Silence settled, deep and clean. He nodded toward the side yard. "I cleared a patch. For a garden. Thought maybe you'd want something of your own." She looked out. Soil turned and ready, the first sign of something new. She blinked hard. "That's kind of you." He shifted, suddenly unsure. "You don't have to use it." She smiled then. "Not big, but real." "I think I will." That night, she found the girl's old journal under the bed. Pages covered in childish script. And at the back, a drawing, stick figures, a house, a woman with a flower in her hair, holding hands with two little girls. She closed it slowly. The next day, she began planting. Carrots, potatoes, and some seeds she'd saved in a tin for years. She'd carried them across 2 states, 3 family deaths, and 1 bitter marriage. He brought her water from the well without being asked. Didn't speak. Just left the bucket beside her and walked away. In the evenings, she sat with the girls, reading from a tattered book of parables. They leaned against her like ivy, wordless and trusting. He would watch from the edge of the room, never intruding. But once, she caught him mouthing the words she read. A week later, one of the girls fell ill. Feverish, trembling, eyes wide with dreams she couldn't escape. The doctor lived miles away, roads too rough to ride fast. She never left the child's side. Damp cloths, cold water, whispered prayers not for miracles but for mercy. He brought firewood, tried to help, but she waved him off. Her hands steadied the small back. Her voice calmed the cries. "I've got her," she whispered. 3 days. 3 nights. And on the 4th morning, the fever broke. The child slept deep, sweat drying on her brow. When she looked up, he was in the doorway, pale from lack of rest. She rose and crossed the room, arms trembling, and fell into him. It wasn't an embrace. It was a collapse. He caught her, held her there, neither of them speaking. She stepped back before her tears could stain his shirt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He shook his head. "Don't be." That night, she took her supper at the table, not by the hearth. The girls set a place for her without asking. He passed her the bread. Their fingers brushed, and neither flinched. He told her stories of when the twins were born, how scared he'd been. She shared a tale of learning to swim in a freezing river, lungs full of laughter. They spoke until the candles burned low. Outside, the night carried on with its usual sounds, owls, wind, the rustle of creatures unseen. But inside, something had shifted. Later, he sat with her on the front steps. Not too close. Just near enough to feel each other breathe. She looked at him. "Do you miss her?" He didn't answer at first. Then, "Every day." She nodded. "I would want someone to miss me, too, when I'm gone." He turned to her slowly. "I think someone would." She stared at the stars. "I used to think grief was a fire. But it's not. It's water. Cold, slow, and heavy. And you just keep swimming." He looked at her. "I think you've made it to shore." She laughed, startled by the sound of it. And for a long time, they said nothing else. But when they stood, their hands brushed again. This time, neither pulled away. A few nights later, she found a bundle wrapped in linen on her pillow. Inside was a small carving, a doll, roughly shaped but careful, with a flower etched on its chest. She held it like it might fall apart. In the morning, he was already at the fence, mending it again, always fixing what others let rot. She brought him water, said nothing, just stood beside him. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked, still looking at the nails. "I did," she answered. "But every time I looked back, I saw a life that never fit." He hammered once. "This one does." She looked out over the field, the girls playing near the tree line, their laughter a soft music. "I think it might." He straightened, faced her fully. The sky behind him was turning gold. "You were never second to me," he said, voice raw. "Just too far to reach. But I see you now." She met his gaze. "Then say it again. When you're sure." He nodded. "I will." And she believed him. Because the bloom doesn't come in fire. It comes slow and sure. The summer brought gold to the prairie. Wheat bowed under its own weight. The garden bloomed soft and full, each row a quiet miracle. Inside the house, laughter came easier now. The girls ran barefoot through the tall grass, hair unbraided, sunburnt and wild. She moved through the home without hesitation now. Her hands knew the cupboards, her feet the creaking boards. At night, she tucked the little ones in and kissed their foreheads like it was something she'd always done. Sometimes, when she passed the mirror, she didn't flinch. She didn't see a ghost or a sister's shadow. She saw herself. He built her a bench beneath the willow tree, the one where initials had once been carved and weathered away. She sat there often, watching the sky paint itself in orange and lavender. But peace never stays long on the frontier. It rides in late and leaves before breakfast. The first warning came in the form of a letter. Smudged ink. Unfamiliar hand. She opened it at the table. He watched her face change. Pale. "My late husband's cousin," she said. "He's coming." "Why?" She looked up, eyes sharp. "He says I owe his family a debt. That I left before my duty was finished." He took the letter. "Read it." Then folded it once and set it near the stove. Neither of them spoke of it again that night, but the air was tighter between them, like a belt drawn too snug. 3 days later, the cousin arrived. Not with lawyers or men, but with a smile that didn't reach his eyes and a saddlebag full of entitlement. He walked into town like someone who owned everything he saw. They met him near the church. She stood straight, hands folded. He stood beside her, quiet but unmovable. The cousin tipped his hat. "Didn't think you'd run so far just to play house again." She didn't blink. "You'll speak with respect. Or not at all." He grinned wider. "You still got that mouth on you." The widower stepped forward. "State your business." The man looked him up and down. "You the one who paid for her? What was the price again? Or was she just thrown in with the goats?" The street went quiet. Every door cracked just enough for eyes to peek through. He didn't raise his voice. Just said, "Leave. Now." The cousin sneered. "She's still family by name. Which means she's got no right to be free of our claim." A judge was called. A hearing set in the church the next morning. That night, the house was silent. She stood by the stove, staring at nothing. "I thought I was done being bought," she said. "You were never bought," he replied. "I was passed like a coin from one palm to another." He stepped closer. "Not by me. I didn't bring you here to own you." She turned. Her voice was quiet but cut sharp. "Then why did you?" He took a breath. "Because you were drowning. And I was too. And I thought maybe we could learn to breathe again. Together." She didn't answer. Just walked past him to the porch. There, under the stars, she whispered to herself, "I am not a thing. I am not a thing." Morning came heavy. They gathered in the church, its pews full of curious, judgmental faces. The judge sat at the front, spectacles low, gavel idle. The cousin presented papers, witnesses, debts, records of her stay, the date her husband died, the inheritance she abandoned. Then she stood. I was a wife. A good one. I buried him with my own hands. And then his brothers tried to sell me like a mule. That's not family. That's survival. And I survived. Whispers stirred the air. The judge cleared his throat. And what of the man who brought you here? She turned toward the widower. He gave me safety without chains. He gave me choice. That's more than any of them ever did. The judge nodded slowly. And your claim, sir? He asked the widower. He stepped forward, met every eye in the room. She is not mine. I have no claim to her. I simply opened the door when the world tried to burn her down. Silence. Then, the youngest girl's voice rose from the pews. She stayed when I was sick. She sang to me. That means something. The judge leaned back, tapped his gavel once. This woman owes no one. The matter is closed. The cousin growled something under his breath, but no one moved. No one helped him pack. No one met his gaze as he stormed out of town. Later, she stood in the church alone. The dust danced in the light. Her hands trembled. He found her there. You were brave. She turned. Her voice was a whisper. I'm so tired of fighting. He reached into his coat, pulled out something small. A wooden ring. Rough. Whittled by hand. The kind a man carves when he's got nothing but time and hope. He held it out, eyes steady. I'm not asking to fix you. I'm asking to walk beside you. As long as you'll let me. She stared at it. At him. Then took it. Slipped it on her finger like it had always belonged. I'm not a wife anymore, she said. No, he said softly. You're something more. At dusk, the girls ran through the meadow, giggling as they chased butterflies. She sat on the porch with her head on his shoulder, hands folded in her lap. Not out of duty. Not out of need. Out of choice. He kissed her temple, light as breath. And she closed her eyes. The next morning, the first tomato ripened in the garden she planted. And in the space where a scar once lived, something gentle bloomed. Because she had not been sold. She had been seen. She had not been rescued. She had been chosen. And for once, the world didn't whisper. It stood in quiet awe. Because sometimes love doesn't roar in. Sometimes it walks barefoot through the kitchen, sets down a basket of laundry, and says, "You're home now." Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.